Morning, Ben. How are you today?
Marvellous, Matt. Thank you. Sun's come out. Spring's on the way.
Yeah. Back to cold weather this coming week, though, so it's going to be interesting to see what the parasites do. Anyway, you've got some interesting stuff to tell us about this week.
Absolutely. So the contents for today are, firstly, fluke continues to be unpredictable. I think probably because of the mild winter and the wettish back end. Things this year here seem to have shunted forward, so that we are still seeing acute fluke here in and now we basically are in March. So the message is just take a minute to think what stage of fluke you're intending to kill, with what treatment, and what diagnostics you might need to get that right. So here is two cases which hopefully will demonstrate that point. So case number one is a case of 25 tups which were housed last year on the 28th of December. Now, on this farm, they'd had some fluke in the ewes, but the tups had been somewhere else. So they were housed on the 28th of December. They came in and they were in for a bit just to make sure the fluke were old enough to kill, but didn't need this long. But a couple of weeks went by and they were treated with triclabendazole on the 19th of January. So hopefully that will have killed all the fluke, because there wouldn't have been any reinfection after that. However, the tups continued to lose condition, and then on the 26th of January they weren't happy with them, so they treated them again with closantel. However, 2 days after that, one of them died, and this was its liver. So you can see here on this picture on the left, you have a virtually adult fluke in there. With that red circle there, you've got a virtually adult fluke. Now, this sheep died 9 weeks after housing and 6 weeks after treatment. So the important thing here is that the triclabendazole should have killed those fluke, because there would be no reinfection because they were in. Every single fluke should have been killed on the 19th of January, and yet on the 28th of February, when this one died, those fluke were still there. So we are very likely in this case to have triclabendazole resistance. So here's the next slide. We knew how old the fluke were, because you can age them by their size. So we knew that those fluke were virtually adult by the time the animal died, by their size. Okay, and this is the measurements to be able to know how old a fluke is with how big it is. So what could have been done differently here? At the time the tups were treated, we could have done a coproantigen test. But if the coproantigen test had been done, then 2 weeks after the triclabendazole treatment, you could have tried a coproantigen reduction test to make sure that triclabendazole had been effective. So you could have had in the back of your mind, is this treatment going to be effective, and done the coproantigen reduction test at that time. And if the coproantigen was still present 2 weeks after the triclabendazole treatment, then you could have treated those tups with closantel earlier, and the condition loss wouldn't have been as bad, and that one wouldn't have died. The next slide mentions that these guys are going to have a think in future about what they're going to do. Animals that are in the place of the farm where these tups came from will have to be treated with triclabendazole resistance in mind. And I think prompt and sequential serology throughout the season to know when they go positive, followed up by coproantigen test, which will tell you when the closantel is going to be effective, is probably going to be advisable on that farm. So I think it would probably be a good idea to treat the housed cattle with closantel to kill the vast majority of the flukes inside, so that they don't act as a reservoir of triclabendazole resistant fluke when the cattle are turned out to infect the sheep. It is an emerging problem, is triclabendazole resistance, isn't it?
It is, and especially when you've got cattle on farm, I think it's always worth doing just a pooled egg count, egg detection for the housed cattle before you turn out, to make sure that your early season housing treatments have been fully effective. And if there's any eggs coming through, then you can treat those batches of cattle before they get turned out, and then you're as confident as you can be they're not going to be carrying adult fluke back out of the pasture.
Then case number 2 is a case where some sheep were away from home and they came back on the 2nd of March. They were out on some wetland, so fluke was a consideration, but they were brought back, and on the assumption that this is March now and that the fluke are going to be getting older and older with every passing day, a day or two after their return they were treated with closantel, but one of them died the next day. And here is the abdomen of the lamb which died, and you can see at the bottom there a big blood clot there at the bottom in that abdomen. And what had happened was, this was a case of acute fluke, as the next liver shows you. You can see those hemorrhagic tracts working their way through the liver there. I could not see any adult or even nearly adult fluke. I could see some tiny flukes in the main substance of the liver, but certainly no fluke that were old enough to be killed by closantel. So the answer here was that this was a case of acute fluke, not subacute fluke. So the fluke were a lot younger than possibly would be expected for this time of year. They were all less than 4 millimeters, very small immature flukes in the substance of the liver. So the closantel would not have been effective against those flukes. So they were retreated with triclabendazole the day after this post-mortem was done. So the summary of all this is that the timings are absolutely crucial, and there is always some detective work to be done when you have a case of fluke, when you find out what you've treated them with. Have you treated them with the right drug for the right stage of fluke? And remember that the diagnostic pattern goes, the direct diagnostic sequence goes, serology first at 2 weeks post-infection, then coproantigen at 6 weeks post-infection, and then eggs at 12 weeks post-infection. But, and I would say this, wouldn't I, prompt post-mortem of all deadens will give you an unequivocal idea, well, an unequivocal answer of how old were these fluke at the time of death. And from that, you can work out whether or not your treatment was effective. Next one is just a quick reminder to say, if you are unlucky enough to experience infectious abortion in sheep, please submit the placenta as well as the lambs. Here on the left is a case of enzootic abortion, where the placenta looks like a pizza, where you have thickening in the bits in between the cotyledons and some custody discharge on the cotyledons. And here on the right is a case of toxoplasma, where the cotyledons look like strawberries, little white spots on the cotyledons. And then the last point of today is that this happens every single year. We have pregnant suckler cows whose calves are getting bigger and bigger and bigger in their abdomen. It is cheap and easy to supplement with protein or non-protein nitrogen, but you need to know that you have to. The other thing you can do is do a metabolic profile, and blood ureas is a good proxy of how much effective rumen degradable protein they've got. But the most important thing you can do, and it's still not too late to do it, is to analyze the silage and look particularly at the crude protein. And if you've a choice, feed the worst stuff first and the best stuff later. And it's just so easy to prevent and easy to correct once you know you have to correct it.
Yeah, that's a good call on that one. I would say the same. Analysing forage is essential for feeding sheep as well as cattle.
Absolutely.
Absolutely
even more important.
Yeah. And money well spent.
Yes, that's even if you pay for it. I mean, often you can get it done for nothing.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Ben. That's interesting as ever. I particularly like the unpredictability of fluke. I'm not sure anybody else does, but it's very interesting from a technical point of view.
Yes.
So thanks again, and we'll catch up with you next month.
Will do. Good.